Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning the Yerushalmi Kalayim, Pedig Beis, Halacha Aleph. We are in the middle of the Mishnah. We're going to be learning today Daf Yud, starting all the way on top. We don't have the Girsa that we are beginning Mishnah Beis. We are actually in the middle of Mishnah Aleph. And let's go back just to review the basic opening rule of the Mishnah. And that is that if seeds, even in a very small minority, got mixed in to the majority species of seeds, and these two are not the same. So we said, and as will be clarified today explicitly in the Gemara, that as long as that mixture was not done on purpose, we'll define better what that means. There is a certain time, there is a certain ratio in which we say, no one mixed it on purpose. The person who's planting it doesn't want the taste or the other minority seed in there. He doesn't want it. He doesn't care for it. There is a time where it's bottled. There is a point, there is a ratio where we say, aha, you have to go either yima'it or yavar. And what was that ratio? So we spoke about 23 out of 24 is wheat, right? That's a saw. A saw is 6 kav, right, guys? And every kav has 4 quarters. 6 times 4 is 24. So when you have a total of a saw, which means 24 roiva hakavs, 23 is wheat, 1 is barley. That is where you have a problem, even though it got mixed unintentionally. Now that you have the problem again in the Mishnah, I hope Rab David will come and listen. If not, that was where we got stuck last time. Either yima'it means make the ratio smaller. There are 2 ways of doing it. By finding some of the barley, not all of it, and removing it. So now you have less than that ratio, or by adding more wheat. I'm just saying to do the easiest, whatever you want to do. However, Rabbi Yossi said, no, once you already have a problem, now that you have to deal with it, you have to deal with it all the way. And therefore he says the words yavoir, that's with the vase, and that means you got to remove all of the minority seed. That is the basic rule of the Mishnah. The Mishnah now will further elaborate on that rule. And to understand the next line of the Mishnah, we have to introduce the following. Excluding seeds of trees, guys. Guys, we know this from learning the Rambam well. All other seeds should be divided. I know that Rambam says 3. We're going to go into 2. Okay? But we now that we'll learn this, we'll better understand the Rambam right away. You said, I got it. The 2 types of seeds that are negay in our Mishnah are edible seeds versus seeds that are not edible. The Mishnah will say that the ratio of seeds, a quarter of a kav in the saw of seeds, is only if the seeds are edible, whether it's tfua and tfua, whether it's tfua and kitnias and tfua. Right, tfua, when we say tfua, we are referring halachically, specifically to the 5 grains, wheat, barley, oats, rye, and spelt. And kitnias will be a generic term, even though literally it means legumes. It will mean all other types of seeds that are edible. Mashe'en kain, if we have seeds that are not edible, just to give their inedible seeds are called in the Mishnah zeiroine gina. Zeiroine gina in English is garden plants. How do you define halachically garden plants? I'll give you just 2 examples, turnips or carrots, that the edible part of the plant is not the seed. The edible part, actually remember that if anything that the edible part is not the seed, grain, popcorn, you're eating the grain. The grain can be planted, the grain could be eaten. When you grow tfua, the shaft you throw away, right? The whole avoid of boided. That which you plant is that which you eat. You have a choice. Same thing with legumes. Anything that's not that way, like a carrot. Think about a carrot. The part that you eat is not the seed. There, the idea of the ratio is the same. The idea, but the application of the idea will not be the same. That's awesome. That will be the part of the Mishnah that we're going to be learning today. The Gemara is going to begin by quoting a Braisa that will have a variation of the law of the Mishnah. The Gemara is going to clarify the Braisa two ways, and after we'll clarify the Braisa, the Gemara will turn to analyze the mixture of seeds that we are talking about by basically asking how were those seeds mixed. If they were mixed on purpose, the purpose is that I want to plant two types of seeds, then there's a rule called, that's the way we will learn the Gemara, big machlokes how to learn it. Mevatlin isa lechatchila. I know that we began a few minutes late. I'll try to chaparayim and speak just a little bit about this rule that mevatlin isa lechatchila. So that cannot be the case of the Mishnah. Furthermore, if there was another issue, and that is deceit, gezela. We know the Rabbi gezela, right? A guy goes over in Brazil. It happens that you go over the guy with a gun and you tell him, "Give me your money," right up, huh? Our armed Rabbi, did they have all that? That's by everyone. That's because there's other gezela's deceit. So we're going to be learning about deceit, and we're going to be learning that if a person intentionally mixes into the product that they're selling wheat. If they add any amount of barley, 1 grain of barley, therefore they will sell less wheat. That's called gezela. And we're going to learn a whole sugya that we have a mavabasta b'chlal. When you sell all products, all natural products, there's a certain normal accepted amount of psoilas, of impurities that are accepted. The Mishnah gives those ratios. But as the Gemara will point out, it's only acceptable if it's there naturally. So I think the rule is that for every saw of chitim, there can be, I think it's the same amount of dereva of impurities. We'll learn that inside. I forgot. There's a certain amount. Now, what happens if my wheat happens to be mamash pure? I'm the seller. I cannot go and say, listen, I would have gotten away by having a certain small amount of impurities, which is beneficial for me. Let me remove the wheat. Let me put in impurities. And that's called gezela. No, the point will all be that you're not allowed to mix one seed and the other. All of that will lead up to the kasha. What is the case of the Mishnah? I know we spoke about this when we learned the Mishnah. The case of the Mishnah was it got mixed inadvertently, but the Gemara will give certain words. We'll learn the Marafulda, we'll learn the Pnei Moshe, and let's go hit the book quickly because we have to catch up. Okay, so first of all, Bamed Dvarim Amur. Bamed Dvarim means the ratio simcha of 23 out of 24 wheat. 1 out of 24, that's the ratio that becomes the problem, right? 1/4 of a kav in a saw of grains, but less than that, it's not a problem. When is that? So the Mishnah uses the words that if it's tvua betvua, that it's kitnias bekitnias, tvua bekitnias, kitnias betvua. All of these grains and legumes, either direction, with each other, with the other, in any direction, are all seeds that are edible. However, aber be'emes amru be'emes. There are different ways of teaching it, right? We're familiar. Let's go with the most accepted. Be'emes means halacha lo Moshe Sinai. However, we know that zeiroi negina, and how do you define garden plants? We just spoke it out. The definition is she'einam nechalim. Lamashal, like we said, turnips. Lamashal, carrots. The edible part of the plant is not the seed. That's where we will use the words Zeiroi Negina. Guys, this is Amachaya. Right? I didn't have these words when we learned at Rambam. I remember we're learning it, and I think we even have a discussion. That's the definition over here. So here, listen. I want to say this by heart, then we'll read it inside. Until now, we were speaking just about the seeds. A saw is a quantity. We said a saw is comprised of 6 kav. Kav is a measurement. There's something else that's similar. We said it good when we learned the Mishnah. It's called a base saw. Just know, technically, base saw is a land in the area of 50 by 50 amas, which means it's a land that has a total of 2,500 square amas. The word base saw means that the seeds, normally, let's say by tfuah, will work that way. A saw of seeds will take up how much land for it to grow? A base saw of land. The Mishnah was not focused on the land. The Mishnah was focused on the seeds. A roiva in a saw. That's the problematic ratio. What about certain seeds that if you want to fill up a base saw of land, you need less seeds? They are more potent in the context of less makes more grow, or less seeds fills up more land. Maybe the ratio should not be based on the seeds. It should be based on a quarter
On the
of a
output?
kav of the base saw.
Is it the output?
Very good. The output of the land. Seeds versus the output on the land. So when it comes to edible seeds, since they are edible themselves, they're chasher for themselves. We know the ratio of a roiva in a saw. We don't care about, all seeds are the same. Certain seeds might make, you need more to fill up a saw, less, who cares? The seeds themselves have the shear because they are edible. The moment seeds have no chashivus for themselves at all because they're not edible. What's the milo? What's the chashivus of the seed? The fact that when you put it into the ground, something will grow. So you have to use the same idea, but not in the seeds, but in the growth, in the output. And let's read it inside them. We'll read inside them at our full day, and we'll give it a specific example. You'll get it. It's very easy. However, so says the Marafulda. Guys, you're going to see every word is going to be sweeter than honey. First of all, the word neufel, just a rule. Planting is no word that's used by seeds that are planted one by one. We're learning Kalayim, we're learning about planting just to get to use the proper wordings in the Mishnah. Whenever seeds are planted by filling up a hand and throwing it into the ground, not one by one, a group, the word of the Mishnah is neufel. It's felled, not b'diavad, l'chatchila. We don't say zoyrek, but it's neufel. You allow the feet. So we're speaking about seeds that are not edible, are neufelled into the ground. Look inside them enough. Neufel hainu zriya, koloimer keshiur hazer shezoyrin mehen mokim shezoyrin boisachit. So we're going to use chitim as the ground zero. One saw of chitim will fill up a land of a base saw, which, as we mentioned, is 2,500 square amas. Very good. 50 amas by 50 amas, 2,500 square amas. The shiur ha'mokim in the manaful. The guys, this first narrow line. The shiur ha'mokim shezoyrim by saw chitim hu 5 ama al 5 ama. The ain't sarich la'oisa mokim is eroy negina. If I want to take that space of a base saw David and I want to fill it up, but I'm planting garden seeds, I don't need a soft seed. I need much less. You know how much I'll need? Only a kav and a half. Can you imagine? A kav and a half of seeds in the category of Zeroi Negina will fill up the base saw. Lefi shehem dakin ubekav v'cheitzi. Not 6 kav. 6 kav is a saw. Look at how much less. Only a kav and a half. Yesh behem kedei l'srei makam nun al nun. Now let's make the cheshbon. The idea is the same. What's the idea, Chevra? Where's Rabbi Chaim? We're talking about one of 24. But you're not beginning with the saw. You're beginning with a kav and a half. Nimtza lefi cheshbon zeh that im nesar b'saw shel tfua oy kitnis oy shel zeroin. In other words, doesn't matter what is getting mixed into. But let's go with the chitim. So out of a saw of chitim means I have 23 quarters of cups, right? 23 of a saw of chitim. In it falls in only echad michavdalid, but not echad michavdalid of a saw. Echad of chavdalid of what's needed to plant the base saw, which is only a kav and a half. So a 24th of a kav and a half is echad mitez zayin bekav, a 16th of a kav. Not a quarter of a kav, much, much, much less, a 16th of a kav. Now, chayev l'mayit. No, this was a chumrah that the Mishnah is giving. Right. Amar Rab Shimon. First of all, be'emes is said where there's no machlokes. He's not arguing. He wants to make a very important point that you gave an example. We just gave an example. So that you don't even have a saw. In other words, it's much less. It's not bottled so quick. It's only echad mitazayin bekav is already not bottom. That was a chumrah. What happens if we're going to use this concept in another type of zeroi negina, in which to fill up a base sum, you need a lot more? Rab Shimon says, there you'll be lakula. We're going to use this thing that we're learning today, lenient. It's not only l'chumrah, lakula. The rule will be the same. Look inside. Amar Rab Shimon, kshem amar lahachmed, af lahakel. And he gives an example, right? What's as an example? That hapishton, flax seed, guys, to fill up a base saw of land. You know how much flax seed you need, Simcha? 3 saw. 300% more. Same thing. You're going to have to go from that, a 24th of that, which is much more. In other words, the problem will only begin with a much larger amount. That apishton bitfuam mitzarefes echad me'asrim ben neufel lebei which is gamaldik. Look inside the Mara folder, around 18 lines from the top. Says Rab Shimon, for example, zera pishtan, flaxseed, should tzarach gimel soy lebeisa. Ain't it tzarach lamayit achi yisarev mehem bechitim? Gimel revius besop. What's 300? No, not one roiva hakab, 3 roiva hakabs. And if you have less than that, then you don't have a problem. It's bottled. So beautiful. So we concluded the Mishnah. What's beautiful is the Mishnah is not changing the ratio. The Mishnah is just pointing out that are you cheshboning it? Are you calculating the quantity of seeds? Or are you calculating, using the Gabai's words, the output of the land, all beginning with 1 sub chitim is needed to plant a base of karka. Use that by non-edible seeds.
Is the output of the land or output of the certain thing you're planting? Depends on the
I know. It's the way you're wording it. The output of the seed in the land. It's about the output of in the land, not the seed itself. Okay.
On that grain or whatever.
Yeah. Not the grain. Again, the moment it's edible, even though different grains have different outputs of land, though.
Right.
But if the seeds themselves are edible, we will always go with the shear of a quarter of a kav in 1 saw. Quarter of kav of seeds, of 1 saw of seeds. That's the problematic ratio. A drop less than that is not problematic. Now, first of all, we kept on emphasizing again today that when we speak about the roiva in a saw, every time, guys, we were learning, whoever learned smicha, right? Echad b'shishim. We always emphasize echad b'shishim is not 59 to 9. It's 60 to 1, right? 60 to 1. Huh? Okay, very good. So we were saying good. The Mishnah opens up kol saw sheyesh ba roiva. How do you type sheyesh ba roiva? The roiva is not added to the saw. The saw is comprised also of the roiva of the minority. The Mishnah clearly we understood. There's a brisa that opens up with a little bit of a different verbiage. The words are different, and therefore perhaps the brisa argues with the Mishnah. That's the first shtickle of the Gemara. It says the Gemara anan tanin in our Mishnah, and the Mishnah begins with the words. You can look back in the Mishnah. Kol saw sheyeshba. However, is tanoi, but there's other tanoim. That means we have another brisa, other brisas, perhaps in plural. That the opening line of this same halach is kol saw shenafal l'toicha. Think about those words. Kol saw shenafal l'toicha is more mashma that you already have a sof chitim, and in addition you have now a roiva kav of soidim. That would mean not echad mechav dalet. That would be echad mechav hey l'choira. So indeed, Amar Rav Mana, very good. You have a good deal. You have different words. There's a machlokes. Man the Amar sheyesh ba, which is the words of our Mishnah. Therefore, the ratio is 1 out of 24, 23 of 24 wheat, 1 of the 24 barley. However, man the Amar, but the other tanoim, those words are recorded in Braises, is tanoye, that shenafal l'toicha and echanami, they argue. Echad me'asr v'chamish. That's one way of explaining the different nuschos. However, Amar Rabbi Yossi ben Abun, they're not arguing at all. It's much better that way, especially if we teach that the emes amru, means halacha l'Moshe Sinai. We don't have arguments in halacha l'Moshe Sinai. And even though the words be'emes were used on the part of the Mishnah we learned today, but it's a repetition of the Reish. It's just another application of it. Do you look at the seeds? Do you look at Danny's words, the output? Do you look at the land? How much seeds are needed for a base saw? Don't forget, a saw and a base saw are connected. Why do we call it a base saw? Because since chitim is the most important of everything, a chitim of one saw, you put it in there, it's going to take up the base to house a saw. It's connected. Are you looking at the land or are you looking at the seeds? I get that. But to say that there's a machlokes in the ratio is much. He doesn't want to do that. So he says a gavaldik. He says, Bein command words of the Mishnah. Bein command words of the Braisa. Always it's the same ratio. However, my kedoin, why are we having two different gifsois? So he says, beautiful. Rabbi Yossi berabun. That man our Mishnah, we're speaking about that the seeds got mixed betalush when they were detached. Okay, we're going to come back to that in a moment. However, we're speaking about another case. And what is the case? That b'mechubar. Let me tell you what b'mechubar means. You have a land that was planted barley. You have to understand, we're going to have to learn, do you know that there are certain fruits that can only grow because whether they are bees, whether they are other flying creatures, malach amlach, that they take the Zajac from one tree, they do it, and they put it in the cave of the other tree. And only that's the way it grows. In other words, when you plant things in the ground, nature can add other seeds in it. The wind can blow, which is like a white base and has to announce, right? To go and check your field. We planted everything kadasu kadin. Could be it got mixed. That's the case of the Braisa. So think about this. You planted a barley field. Fell in a wheat field. Fell in their barley. You harvested the field. Many people, they eat some of what they harvest, and then they want to replant another part of it. By the way, guys, I'm allowed to eat wheat and barley together. I'm allowed to make a bread of wheat and barley together. There's no kalaim. Don't get nervous. All of the breads that we buy today in the market, not all of them. If there is grain in it, not what they write, if there's grain in it, don't ask. There's grain, there's legumes, there's kol zeruah v'chol zav. They hack in the bread. And then they go by the FDA. If it's less than 4%, it's 100%. You understand? There's many halachas that we have to be aware of. We can mix, right? The Yecheskel grain, the cursed bread, right? When God says there'll be a curse and there'll be so little grain, that the only way to make a bread is to take the 7 grains, those 7 grains, and then they make us a Yecheskel bread. They sell over here, the Chachamim over here. Namish. Go eat a curse. So, Mando Amashanafa means that it got mixed and it will mechuber. Then it grew. We already mentioned that even when there is a mixture that's not kosher, it should be uprooted. Okay, you uprooted it. You are. After you harvest it, you chop, there's a mixture. Some of it I'm eating, some of it I want to replant. That's the case of the Braisa. No, the Braisa uses the word shenafal l'toicha, not shenafal l'toicha to emphasize it's echad mechafei. No, the Braisa is already beginning to explain how did it get mixed, which will be the next topic of today's daf. How did it get mixed? You're not allowed to mix it. And if you mixed it ba'ofen ha'asur, we don't allow for you to get away if it's less than echad mechavdal. So the Braisa is giving an example that you had a field when it was already planted. You don't know of anything. You're a tzaddik gomer. You harvest your field. You're a farmer. You chop. Well, look what happened. There's some wheat. There's some barley. The ratio is very little. I want to know to eat it. That's not a problem. Ask Gesund to hate. If you want to replant it, that's where the Braisa says echad mechad dalit. But the point of the Gemara of Rabbi Yossi berabun is that the word shenafal l'toich is just a heichetintz of how it got mixed prior to you replanting it. The question is always about, am I allowed to plant these seeds, or do I have to go through it minimally yamayit or even yavai? Okay. And now comes the Gemara, and the Gemara wants to understand, what are we talking about? If it got mixed with intent, when you mix the seeds, even if it's less than the ratio, if your intent was to plant it, before we get into the hilchos of Gezela, right, we will learn the Gemara. Look inside the Rasha Ilio on the left column, 6 lines before the bottom. No, he has a bracket. that if you're mixing it on purpose to plant a mixture, even chita achas also, meaning inside whatever else, one kernel. Chita doesn't mean chitim and soidim. So if whatever you had, so you had chitim, one kernel of barley, asur lizroya. Why? Mishum de emavatl isal lechatchila. I want you to know a few things. First of all, emavatl isal lechatchila is a din derabanan. You know what the biggest kasha is on emavatl isal lechatchila? When are we mevatl isal lechatchila? When you're going to hear it, you're going to say, I knew that. We all know that. And it's a there you go. Exactly. But I'll tell you for the whole year, it's in my Parshas Mato, it's Hagalas Caleb. I got a pot. The pot was used by a goy. He made his chazer with it. I want to use the pot. There's a way of getting rid of the tam ha'isur from the keli.
Is not adding more.
Let me use different words of it, better words. Is when you want the isur. If you want to get rid of the isur, there's no problem. When there's a Beis Avodah Zarah, right, and you're destroying the house, or the way the Taliban did, but they destroyed these 3,000-year-old statues because the destroying Avodah Zarah, they destroyed the culture of the Avodah Zarah mix. That's a mitzvah. If I want to benefit from the davar ha'asur, just remember that. So I want to benefit from it. Here I have a mixture of isur. Now that I know that the ratio is like this, I'm going to put on less. That's where we say if you want to have benefit from both, in this case, it's a mixture of both. If you want to have hana'ah from the davar ha'asur, you can't be mabatal. Okay, that's a big thing. So the same thing with ratio. You're selling a product. When you're selling a product, it goes by weight. If they ever weigh it over here, they write the weight. So you have a little bit of a davar ha'asur. So you say, if it would be a ratio of 60 to 1, 60 of heter to 1 is good. So now that it's 59, I want to sell it. I want to have enough all of it. Well, I have to add more davar hamuter. Now I hit the ratio of 60 to 1. That is where we say you can't do it because I want to leave the isur in it. Okay. So that's number one. There is another issue. The issue is gezelem. First of all, in other words, when the intent is to plant, kilayim is also. You can't do that because of isur v'heter. Then there's another dinam of gezela. V'nadin l'chaveiroi. V'in wa'arei. L'arav would be, the guy's not planting it. The guy just wants to sell it. Like we mentioned, I'm allowed to eat wheat and barley together. So what happens if I have wheat and I want to put a little bit of barley and I want to sell all of it? I'm not telling the buyer. If I tell the buyer, there's no problem. But if I'm putting it in there, that halachically it's batal. If it's batal, I don't have to mention anything because it's batal. If that is why I did it, then that's called deceit. That's gezela. Imagine, it's not geneva. It's called gezela. Look inside the Maraf folder. It's 3 lines from the bottom. The E in middle of the Divrei HaMaschal Ma'anan Kaimen. No, it's Erevan Kedei Limkor Bashok. He's just explaining, mixing it not to eat it. That will be one solution of the answer. You mix it to eat it, then you change your mind. That will be okay. You mix it lachatchila to sell it. That's why he's adding these words. Maybe that was his gears. In Erevan Kedei Limkor Bashok, then it's Asr Mishum Gezel. Shamoy Cholechitim. For who in the case of the Mishnah, Shamoy Shual. Now, how do you know that it's asur? Because of deceit. Who told you that it's asur? Maybe if halachically it's such a small amount, maybe it's inconsequential. How do you know that? So umina teima the asur. The ha Rabbi Yaakov v'chuli. Now turn to Amud Beis, and indeed that's the girsa. It's not the Rabbi Yaakov. So we have the ha in the Marafulda. If you look inside the Shinun Eschais, the first word on top of Yud Amud Beis is the words the Amar. This is a proof. I'm going to prove to Hari. Maybe it's mutter because of Gezela. No, it's asur. And Rabbi Bar Chia b'Shem Rav, and they are going to a Mishnah we have in Baba Basa in the Bavli. It's on Daf Tzadik Gimel Amud Beis. There we just spoke about it in the intro that if a person sells, there the example is a saw of grain. It's not chitam. It's any grain. So the person has to accept a certain ratio which is the ratio of a quarter of a kav. Same ratio we have over here. Of what? They were not speaking about a mixture of it. They were speaking about soroiros. Remember that? Pebbles, earth, straw, impurities. So that's a fact. In other words, if a seller sold and it's within the norm amount, every product that you sell, right, to whoever's in business, you know that there's a certain amount of imperfections. That's the norm, whatever that is. The norm in the Mishnah is the roiva hakav to asa. Okay, that's a Mishnah. However, what's the chiddush? So we learned over there what happens. Reuven and Shimon, Simcha. Reuven is the farmer. Reuven is selling chitim. He has a neighbor called Shimon. Shimon was bored. What did Shimon do? Shimon went into Reuven's thing, and to do a matcheva, he removed all the impurities from his wheat. What did he end up causing to him? If Reuven wouldn't want to eat it, he did him a favor. If Reuven wants to sell it, he did him a tremendous damage. Why did he do him a damage? Because he's selling it by the saw amount. Now he has to add, for every saw, he has to add a new roiva hakav to get the share of a saw. Because since it had the amount that was still okay of impurities in it, if the impurities are removed, it's a financial loss on the seller. So we call that he was mazik biyadayim. That's the din of Rabbi Yaakov bar Acha and Rabbi Abba bar Chia b'Shem Rav, that the Shimon has to compensate for that difference. Let's read it inside. Right? In other words, it's called mazik biyadayim because the seller now has to complement the shiur. Now a bomb question on that. I have a bomb question. What a very simple you were saying that. Why does he have to compliment Shimon? If we accept a certain amount of impurities, why doesn't Reuven go ahead, take those impurities, and put it back in? That's the raya. The raya is that even when we tolerate a certain amount of mixture, less than a certain ratio, it's called bottle, that's only if it's already there. But for you to do it, mixing, that's called gezein. Amar Rabbi Yossi, zoi soy meres. Aha, that's who was a because then why would the Shimon have to? Why would he have to compensate by complementing to the shear with proper wheat? Why? Let him put back the impurities, the same impurities, other impurities. Is araya one thing? Deliberate mixing is considered outright deceit. That's the nakuda, and we're going le'inyan. It's seroidas over there, and here if the idea is to sell wheat, and you're putting in even one sheet of barley, you did the seed. You're not allowed to mix. What's going to happen now in the next two pieces is something relatively unusual in the Yerushalmi, completely usual in the Bavli. We're going to digress. Now that we're talking about in the Bavli, we can go for 10 daf. Now we're going to go for two shtikla. Because before we come back to the Kashan and to the tenets of our Mishnah, we already explained the question. What's the case of the Mishnah? Not the case of the Braisa we know. The case of the Braisa is perfect. But the case of the Mishnah. Okay. But now that we're talking about this mixing, now the Gemara makes another observation. What happens if the seller, Reuven, tells the buyer, Machar loy chitim yafis? The word yafis means quality wheat. I want you to know that even when you say quality wheat, we still tolerate the amount, the ratio that we spoke about. Right? That again, that is a quarter. A roiva, exactly. It's the same ratio there. Quarter of a kav in every saw. That's a lot. Okay? So now, what happens if they said the word yafis? Shimon ended up buying beruros. Beruros means it was no impurities. Turned out that what he sold him was completely clean from all impurities. So he wanted to know, Ma'u sheyenakaloi, the may oisaraiva or oisaraiva. Can Reuven tell him, I want to get more money? Or let me word it better. Can Reuven tell Shimon, listen, I told you I'm selling you chitim yafos. The Mishnah allows, even when you use the words chitim yafos, to have a certain amount of defect. Every product in the shmata business, for my father, I knew that there's a certain amount, a small percent of defect that they tell you have to tolerate. The world is not perfect. What happens if it turns out that the seller discovers what he's selling for something mamish perfect? Let me go in my case. We said a saw is 6 kav. If Reuven discovers that this lot is mamish perfect, maybe let Reuven tell Shimon, I'm only going to deliver 5 kav and 3/4 of a kav. You're paying for a whole saw. Yeah, but when you pay for a whole saw, you never expected to get a whole saw. You expected to get 5 3/4 of kav of perfect. Now that it's all perfect, I see a lot to do that. So same thing, the same raya. So this inquiry was resolved from what we just said. That Milayan, that Rabbanan Amrin. No, from what we just learned above, the Rabbanan goes to 2. Rabbi Yaakov Baracha and Rabbi Abba Bar Chia Barak. From what they said, from their logic, that if you're allowed to mix, then why would we say he has to pay? Let's use the same logic. He can't do that. And the Rabbi Abba Bar Chia B'Shem Rav, Habayr Tzorez from Teichinus Chavedoi, Chayv Lahem Lechitim Yafis Tachteim, Gavaldik. Same thing, David. Simple. Let's go. The guy went ahead, Shimon, and he did his neighbor a toiva. He removed the impurities. Why does he have to pay him anything? Why does he have to pay him anything? Let Reuven charge for a saw and only deliver the 5 kav and 3/4 kavim of what Shimon removed. The fact that we say, oh, he's a mazik biyadayim, not only does it prove that you can't mix it back in, it also proves that you have to deliver the whole saw. You can't make the fact that there's normally a certain amount of imperfections, you can't make that into the ground zero. No, you sold the saw. If there happen to be X amount of impurities, the buyer has to swallow it up until a certain amount. But if everything is perfect, the seller cannot overcharge for that. Another din that we can extrapolate. The final din. What happens if in the other direction of it? Reuven knows he's a wheat seller. He knows that if there's up to the roiva, he has to accept it. I don't know if they're ad the let's go to the roiva. He has to accept it. What happens if it turned out there was a roiva and a half a roiva of impurities? Of impurities. Okay, and now what? One thing is for sure. That other half a roiva, Reuven has to compensate. No doubt. But here comes the question. That the buyer bought it. The buyer who's going to bake it in the oven, let's say, he went through all the impurities and he actually removed the roiva and a half. So now the question is, if he would have gotten only 1 roiva or a drop less, he cannot ask for any discount. Now that he discovered it was a roiva and a half, maybe the extra half, for sure, the extra half he doesn't have to pay for. He gets what's called a refund, or a half a roiva of chitim, or the money of a half a roiva back. That's for sure. Can he get now for the whole thing? Why would he be able to actually machlekas hamaroin? Like you would think, why would he? Why can he get? He should only get half a roiva. How can he get not only the half that was not allowed? How can he get? We'll see it inside. So Rabbi Chinana says minakaloi that he gets everything back. Gewaldig. And why is that? Here's the logic. The logic is that once the seller has in it impurities that are beyond the right amount, and our Mishnah we had a machlokes, yimayit or yavoid, by produce yavoid. Once, if I'm the seller, once I know that there's too much impurities, I have to remove it all. So that's what the buyer is claiming. Now I see there was a roiva and a half. You were not allowed to sell this to me. If you would have done the right thing, you would have removed it all. I would have gotten not 5 kav and 3/4 kav. I would have gotten 6 kav of the whole saw of chitim. No, it's now that the obligation was triggered and you, the seller, didn't keep your end of the line. Now I want a discount for the whole roiva and a half. However,
is that for compensation of his time that it took him to take out the impurities?
No. Now that he not first time. Now that he discovered. However, Rav Mana disagrees with that. You know why? Because what would have happened? What would have happened if the buyer who got the wheat went through it? He removed the extra half a roiva first. He removed that, and then he sees there's still impurities. You know what he could have done then? He could have taken this as it is right now, given it back to the seller, and told the seller, I want my money back. The seller would have to give him the money back. You know what the seller would do now? he would be able to sell the whole thing. Because he never put the mixture in there. The excess of the mixture was removed by the buyer. Now that he got it back with the accepted amount of impurities, he's allowed to resell it. So the seller says, why should I give you the whole roiv and a half back money? No. Once you took off half a roiv and you realize there's still more in there, you should have been mevatel the mekach. I would have given you back all your money. I would have gotten back now a saw that only has a roiv, and I would have resold it. If you would have given it back to me, I would have repackaged it. Keminig America, put it in a nice packaging. Sirke means I would have put it in a colorful cloth, right? A broken bathtub of it in a nice box, my dear. Then that's it. And then the buyer would have purchased the beautiful box that has in it the accepted amount of defected product. So I don't have to give you back the whole roiv and a half. Atkan, the digression. Now we're back to the kasha. So what's the case of the Mishnah? Answers the Gemara Ella. Says the Marafulda that the person gathered grain into his house to eat. When I'm eating grain, I'm allowed to lechatchila mix. I like the flavor of barley and wheat. I'm allowed to mix it. That mixture is not, I'm not mixing to plant it, so there's an issur of mabat lechatchila. I'm not mixing it kedei limkoid, the seed, gizela. I'm mixing it for me to eat. Then I changed my mind, and I says, you know what, I'm not eating it. I want to replant it. That is the case of the Mishnah. Beautiful. To be continued.